Just to be clear, so we're not bandying words here, did you request or signal or otherwise communicate in any way that you wanted Rod Rosenstein to go?
No, the president said that the decision on the deputy was mine. Anything I wanted to do on the deputy was
So
fine.
we will find no William Barr fingerprints on Rosenstein's departure.
No, Rod and I have been talking, about his plans. He told me that he viewed it as a 2-year stint and would like to use, if I'm confirmed, my coming in as an occasion to leave. But we talked about the need for a transition, and I asked him if he would stay for a while, and he said he would. And so as of right now, I would say he has no concrete plans. I have no concrete plans in terms of his departure.
And you have not
we're going to sort of
undertaken-
play it by ear and see what makes sense.
And you have not undertaken to run him out in any way?
Absolutely not.
That leaves an opening at the DAG position whenever you work this out. Can you tell us, since attorneys general are very often defined by the immediate appointments around them at chief of staff, DAG, criminal chief, what are the characteristics and qualifications that you will seek as you fill particularly that position, but all three that I mentioned?
I'm sorry, the deputy, and what was the other
Deputy chief of staff and criminal chief.
one? There is already a criminal chief.
I know.
Yeah.
There's already a deputy attorney general, but he's leaving.
Well, for a deputy, I'd like someone who's a really good manager and who has had good management experience running government programs, and I want a first-rate lawyer and someone whose judgment I feel comfortable in.
Experience in the department?
Not necessarily, but experience in government at a high level.
When we met, I gave you a letter that you've seen, just so none of these questions would be a surprise, so I hope it is no surprise to you that I'm going through some of them. If you're confirmed, what will be the department's rule regarding communications between Whitehouse and Department of Justice officials regarding criminal and investigative matters? Who at DOJ will be allowed to have those conversations with the White House, and who at the White House will you entertain those conversations from at DOJ?
So, I've looked through the existing regime, and my instinct is to keep it, maybe even tighten it up a little bit more. I remember when George W. Bush's administration was coming in, my advice was start tight, and then as you realize who has judgment and so forth, you can go back to a...
They went the other way, and it was a bad day for Attorney General Gonzalez in the hearing room when that was brought to his attention. What is your understanding right now of who at the Department of Justice is authorized to have communications with the White House regarding
Well, it depends.
investigations?
It depends what it is, but on criminal matters, I would just have the AG and the deputy.
And what do you think the rule is now in the department?
I think that's what it is.
Okay. So if the reports are true that, as chief of staff, Mr. Whitaker was involved in conversations with the White House about bringing criminal investigations against the president's political enemies, that would not be consistent with your understanding of that policy.
Well, it would depend upon, what his understanding is with the Attorney General. I mean,
Well, the Attorney General was recused, so hard to step into the shoes of a recused Attorney General on that matter, right?
well, I don't know what the communication's related to. I'm not really sure what you're talking about.
Okay. Well, I hope you'll become sure when you get there, because there's a fair amount of, I think, questionable behavior that has gone on that does not reflect well on the department that I hope will get your attention. I also asked you about the special counsel investigation and to give us a clear exposition of how that memo came to be, who you talked to, when, who was involved in it. There were a number of questions in that letter that at this point you have not answered. You have, I gather, told the chairman the names of some dozen or so people whom you contacted, as I understand it, once the memo was written, but it's not clear. Do you have any objection to answering the questions that I wrote as questions for the record so that the committee can understand who you worked with, who you talked with about this idea, who you worked with in preparing the memo, who helped you with things like citations that people at your level don't often do yourselves, and where it was circulated and vetted and what edits were made and so forth?
No, I have no objection to that.
Great.
But
let that
just to be clear, no one helped me write the memo, and I know how to do legal citations, which I do.
Yeah, well, a lot of people know how, but that doesn't always do
I
it.
do it. I did
Okay.
it. Okay.
You might want to get out of that habit. You may have other things to look at.
I'd like to have some fun in life.
If you think citations are fun, you're not gonna have the problem some other nominees have had. My letter to you also asked about the Bork order that set out a series of protections for the then independent counsel operation. Do you have any objection to any of those rules or principles applying, and should we see those rules and principles, which I gave to you then, as being more or less adopted into the statement that you made earlier about your protection of the Mueller investigation from political interference?
I looked at them. I think the current regime is what I'm happy with. In other words, I wouldn't change the current rule. Those rules were put in place at the end of the Clinton administration, and sort of, I think, reflects the back-on-back experience of the Reagan-Bush years and then the Clinton years, and then sort of Justice Department's thinking under the Clinton administration as to how to balance all the equities, and I think it's working well. So
well, if there's anything that you would disagree with in the so-called Bork rules, I'd ask you to explain that in a follow-up. QFR, in a follow-up.
Okay, okay.
Also in my letter to you, I expressed my concern that Mr. Whitaker was paid $1.2 million through what I consider to be a front group that has very little reality to it, and that the funding that came to that front group to pay him the $1 million came through another entity that is essentially an identity laundering operation that has no independent business operation. And the result of all of this is that somebody out there arranged to get over $1 million to Mr. Whitaker, and we have no idea who that somebody is. And as I mentioned to you in our conversation, I don't see how the department can do a proper recusal and conflict analysis for somebody when the player who delivered the $1 million is still hidden behind the curtain. Is that something that you will help us fix?
Well, first, I don't think there was anything wrong done, or
Well, we don't know that yet because we don't know what the facts are.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, just the facts that you've said, doesn't necessarily mean there was anything wrong done. What you're saying is that if the ultimate financial backers are behind some entity and the current ethics laws require only the reporting of the entity, you're not really sure where the money is coming from. And that, I think that raises a very interesting point that I think I would like to review with the ethics people and experts and even OGE to talk about that, because the more I thought about it, the more I thought that the trick is going to be deciding what kind of entities and how far back you go, because that can be said of a lot of different kinds of entities.
Yeah.
And
sometimes
sometimes you have first...
that if the department's money laundering folks looked at this operation, they would see it as almost amateurish and simple and something quite easy to penetrate, and it would be quite easy simply to ask Mr. Whitaker what he knew, to ask whoever is still at fact, if it even has any existence with Whitaker's departure, what they knew, and to ask Donors Trust to cough up the identity of the donor, and then you can do your homework. And if they refuse to do that, nothing guarantees anybody a job at the highest levels of government who's not willing to provide those disclosures.
Well, as I said, one of my first considerations always is where do you draw the line, and also what are the implications for other kinds of entities? Because there are membership groups and First Amendment interests, and you don't want to disclose memberships and who's.
And my point was, I think if you're money laundering folks took a look at that, they'd be able to help show that this is something that looks a little bit different than that. My time has expired, and see you on the second round. Thank you.